The Israeli forces had identified a target since the Hamas attack on October 7th. The individual has made a public declaration of aligning with their Western allies, particularly the United States. The primary objective here is for Israel to dismantle Hamas, both militarily and politically. In the realm of military strategy, when it is said to dismantle an organization within a military context, it implies that the said organization will not be left capable of engaging in any organized actions. In other words, the organization will be incapacitated from planning and gathering resources to carry out any future activities. To establish a new organization in a new location, considerable time and effort will be required. This is analogous to what is often referred to as Vietnamization. In Vietnam, during the 1960s and 70s, a similar war was fought. South Vietnam had a strong government in place with American assistance, including military and financial aid from Western allies like Australia. On the other hand, North Vietnam had a seemingly weaker communist government, with limited support from the Soviet Union and China, although this support was insufficient. The American troops were boots on the ground, meaning they were physically present in South Vietnam and fighting against the North Vietnamese, who aimed to unify the entire region under the name of Vietnam. America wanted to defend South Vietnam and keep it intact, leading to a protracted conflict. North Vietnamese leader Ho Chi Minh realized that they couldn't compete with such a formidable global power on open battlegrounds. They lacked the weaponry, aircraft, helicopters, and tanks in the numbers that could match the combined might of America and its allies in South Vietnam. So, instead of confronting them directly on the surface, they chose to go underground. They constructed interconnected tunnels that were several hundred kilometers long. These tunnels were originally built during the colonial period by the Viet Cong, opposing the French during the war. However, they were now employed against the United States and its allies at a higher level. The tunnels were modernized and extended for several kilometers. Notably, beneath the city of Saigon in South Vietnam, which is now known as Ho Chi Minh City, there existed an entire underground city within these tunnels. It housed hospitals, storerooms, resting areas, movie theaters, hiding spots, manufacturing facilities for weapons, kitchens, and even a ventilation system. There were numerous small passageways branching out, making it a complex network. These underground tunnels were the biggest headache for the Americans and their South Vietnamese allies. Most of the tunnel entrances were concealed within the dense jungles of Vietnam. Some were so well hidden that reaching them required swimming through lakes with only a few inches of reeds visible from a distance, indicating the tunnel's entrance. Some entrances were located within the roots of trees, while others were hidden in nearby villages' animal pens. It often happened that whenever American or South Vietnamese forces were passing through, a communist guerrilla armed with a Kalashnikov would suddenly emerge from somewhere and open fire, then disappear just as swiftly. Surviving soldiers would need to crawl through narrow, coffin-like passages to hunt them down. American troops found it challenging to enter these tunnels. They were often too tall or too wide to fit comfortably inside. Additionally, most of the tunnels twisted and turned, and sometimes had multiple exits and entrances for deception. Bullets fired inside didn't travel far, as the tunnels weren't straight. Some had thick steel doors placed near bends, which prevented the explosion from spreading further. Viet Cong, also known as the North Vietnamese guerrillas, fought mainly from these tunnels, and they were formidable opponents. When the term Viet Cong is mentioned, it refers to the guerrillas fighting against American and South Vietnamese forces. So the Americans thought of using gas in the tunnels as a better way to kill the Viet Cong. They believed that by releasing gas, anyone inside would either suffocate or be poisoned. However, this chemical weapon formula didn't prove highly effective. Firstly, the tunnels were so deep that the gas from above didn't reach far enough below. Secondly, grenades, which were typically thrown into the tunnels, were only effective when the tunnel was straight. In the parts where the tunnels twisted and turned, the grenades would only explode a few feet ahead, not harming anyone farther inside. Therefore, anyone hiding in the tunnels would retreat further down the underground network. The Viet Cong quickly adapted by sealing off parts of the tunnels with small, strong steel doors, preventing the gas from spreading further. In some areas, they dug additional, smaller openings for escape. This made the gas-based weapon formula largely ineffective. The tunnels were the Viet Cong's most potent weapon because they could rest comfortably in them during the day, come out through secret, small openings at night to set traps, such as booby traps that would disable American vehicles and convoys or injure soldiers. To survive, American forces had to navigate these tunnels very carefully. And the best weapon against the Viet Cong was often the tunnels themselves. The Viet Cong were skilled at living underground, and their ability to use these tunnels made them formidable adversaries. Often during the daytime, when American convoys were passing through, a Viet Cong insurgent would suddenly emerge from somewhere and open fire on them. Several Americans and their local allies would lose their lives in such encounters. Then, the communist guerrilla would flee in one direction, and American forces would chase after him. He would quickly jump into an opening of a hidden tunnel, as this was part of his daily practice. However, when American forces reached near the tunnel, they would find themselves surrounded from all sides. This was because the tunnel openings had been dug from various directions during the night. Many Viet Cong guerrillas would open fire from different sides, and after a few seconds of the attack, they would disappear into the intricate tunnel network below. These tunnels usually ended up being dead ends, as they were connected to a larger tunnel, which would be sealed once someone entered it. This meant that below Saigon City, there was a whole subterranean city. Indeed, this city had its own set of problems, such as frequent flooding and sewer issues. From various places, while digging tunnels, the Viet Cong would set traps, and they had to contend with a significant snake population. Moreover, diseases like malaria had a significant impact. However, the guerrilla tactics proved to be more effective than any other weaponry. The Viet Cong's techniques were so costly for the Americans that their tanks and fighter jets were struggling to make a difference. So, to dismantle the tunnels, America had to deploy highly trained engineers. But for this most dangerous task, none of the American forces was willing to volunteer. Even South Koreans, who were their allies, were reluctant. So, America had to resort to searching for volunteers within their own ranks. They began to look for volunteers among their own soldiers, including some who were short in stature and slight in build, to prepare them for fighting against the Viet Cong in the cramped and dark tunnels. These were mostly individuals who were often ridiculed for being weak. In reality, their job wasn't to engage in hand-to-hand combat with the Viet Cong. They would enter the tunnels stealthily and destroy the weapons and supplies hidden inside. If there were booby traps, they had to disarm them. These individuals who were ready to crawl through tight and dark tunnels were referred to as tunnel rats. During the day, these tunnel rats would descend into the tunnels with a flashlight in one hand and a pistol in the other. When they entered, they often didn't know where the ground was soft, and a slight pressure would send them plummeting into a death pit. These pits, lined with sharpened wooden stakes and bamboo spikes, became their graves. Extracting their bodies from there was a big problem. Additionally, the Viet Cong would often hide booby traps at places where the tunnel rats expected to find weapons or supplies. These traps would trigger if they touched or stepped on them. The tunnel rats would shout for help, but until someone came to their aid, they would have already lost hope. Then, removing their bodies from the tunnels was also a significant challenge. These trips were what the Viet Cong charged the tunnels with whenever they left weapons or supplies hidden inside. So when they returned, they already knew how to dismantle these trips. However, the Americans and their allies had no clue. Therefore, the Americans decided to train the tunnel rats to deal with all these things. While the Americans were training their tunnel rats, the Viet Cong were learning and updating their techniques continuously, to the extent that the Americans no longer had tunnel rats to deal with the tunnels. So, only 10 to 12 tunnel rats out of us survived. Sergeants Ronald, Keith Mills, and Jake Flower are such tunnel rats who wrote their stories after surviving. But these tunnel rats who survived also faced enduring psychological issues throughout their lives. The final attack of Operation 75 in April, which was highly coordinated, forced the Americans and their South Union allies to evacuate from the ship's stand using water tanks. They were evacuated from there through Chi Tunnels, a labyrinth beneath the city of Saigon, known as the spiderweb of tunnels. This was where the last stand occurred. When the United States left, Vietnam became free. Saigon was renamed as Ho Chi Minh City. It is evident from recent statements by Hamas that these tunnels house combatants, numbering close to 15,000, who are prepared to confront Israel's ground invasion and terrestrial assaults. The Chi tunnels of Vietnam may have been 50 years old according to North Vietnamese guerrillas' tactics, while the Hamas tunnels in Gaza have been updated. This information is known only to those who have built them or are currently operating them. Hence, it is suggested that Israel will not venture into these tunnels until they obtain devices that can protect them from any booby traps and Chi tunnels-like outcomes. In the words of Ho Chi Minh's guerrilla leader, Gi Chi Minh, there will be another confrontation in the tunnel warfare. In the end, the one who will win is the one whose land is the most populous, because every 10 guerrillas are already prepared to take the place of 100 guerrillas. These facts and historical context make it clear why, up until now, neither Israel nor the United States military experts have suggested immediate ground invasion. Instead, the White House and the Pentagon are advising Israel to exercise caution in matters of ground invasion. However, they cannot definitively state that ground invasion will not take place, because Israeli military experts and American veterans agree that if their goal is to eliminate Hamas, they will have to come down to the ground and enter the tunnels. The tunnel rates will have to be prepared. Now, as you witness Israeli airstrikes on buildings, hospitals, schools, mosques, and churches, it is evident that Israeli forces have been heavily engaged. To demonstrate their dissatisfaction with their own people, they are shedding the blood of children. So far, more than 500 civilians have been killed in less than a week, including over 2,000 children. Israel claims to have also killed 2 senior Hamas leaders, Mohammed Katamesh and Jihad Mohsin. But apart from these 2, they have not yet claimed to have killed any other target. Yes, 700 people are being killed every day. In light of these events, global public opinion, which was standing with Israel on October 7th, is now rapidly shifting. In the previous video, you saw pro-Palestine protests growing worldwide. But now, another incident has occurred that has played a significant role in undermining Israeli support. It's a small gesture. Look at this image. This is of 2 women, one 79 and the other 85 years old. 50-year-old Yurgamali, when handed over to the Red Cross by 2 fighters from the Al-Qassam Brigade, extended her hand for a handshake with the Al-Qassam fighter before getting into the car. They exchanged a shalom, which is what soldiers say when greeting each other in the Israeli military. Later, when both women arrived in Israel, they began narrating their story live after medical examinations. Hybro, speaking Hebrew and likely from the same family as her captors, was providing English translations. In their live transmission, they recounted how they were captured from Kibbutz Reim, the place where they were held captive, the violence they endured during their capture, and their forced journey through an underground tunnel spanning several kilometers. Upon arriving at a location where they were to be held, there was a Hamas guard for every Yurgamali. A doctor would visit them daily, tend to their wounds, and provide them with high-protein meals during the day to prevent malnutrition. The same meals were consumed by their Hamas captors. When asked why she greeted the Hamas fighter warmly while still in captivity, the elderly woman replied that he had been very kind to her throughout their time together. It's worth noting that, according to their claims, these women are from the families that used to bring sick Gaza residents to Israeli hospitals for treatment, which is why they were treated relatively well. Furthermore, Kibbutz Reim, the place from which they were abducted, is known in Israel for being a hub of Israeli liberals who advocate for Palestinian rights and oppose figures like Benjamin Netanyahu. In Israel, it's important to remember that there is a significant secular community that consistently advocates for Palestinian rights, even to the extent of opposing some of the strict religious interpretations that the ultra-Orthodox Jews follow. Even the renowned historian Yuval Noah Harari's family resides in Kibbutz Reim. According to them, they would release kites towards Gaza to let them know that not all Israelis were enemies. So, as we were discussing the immediate aftermath of the release of these Yurgamali women, the global broadcast of their story, which was covered by various channels including Sky News, revealed everything. This included their abduction, the relatively good treatment by Hamas, the underground tunnels, and their arrival at the destination. However, Western and Israeli media mainly focused on the headlines of the first part of their story, where the elderly woman recounted her capture and the arduous journey through dark caves. She famously said, "We came out of hell!" which was a genuine statement, but the media largely ignored the nuances and the aspects of Hamas's relatively positive treatment. It's important to remember that a journalist's job is not just about judgment. It's about presenting facts, allowing the public to form their own opinions based on the information provided. Journalists act as a bridge between events and the people who cannot see or experience them firsthand. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, no matter how gruesome, remains an unrelenting reality. It's the only conflict in the world that is live and ongoing. So this incident also became live coverage. News spread worldwide. 2 different perspectives on the elderly woman's interview were reported, and it led to a debate on social media as well. Some quarters even found Hamas's behavior towards the elderly woman commendable. For Israel, however, the global military aid and defense aid in the billions of dollars continue, despite the difficulty in reaching Gaza that was initially promised by the United States. If we were to distribute those promised 25 trucks to the 1.15 million people in Gaza, each truck would have to serve around 46,000 people. Have you ever heard of such a comical situation? There's no fuel in those trucks either. Gaza currently has the highest number of casualties and the sickest people in the world, but electricity has been cut off. Hospitals need generators, and fuel for electricity is essential, but it's not being sent. The result is that there is a risk of secondarily excess children dying in hospitals, and who knows how many lives have already been lost. Doctors are repeatedly emphasizing this. Palestinian doctors, along with doctors from around the world, who despite Israel's repeated warnings are vacating hospitals and not leaving the patients behind, humanity cannot thank them enough. We salute these brave doctors to all the medical officers. These doctors have also fallen victim to Israeli bombings, as the number of casualties in Israel's attacks has increased. However, they have not abandoned the service of humanity. With each passing day, the situation in Gaza is becoming increasingly dire. The theater of war has expanded from the United States to China within the 3rd week. So, if we look at the geography, the entire world has somehow become involved in it. Russia has also moved its powerful weapons close to the battlefield. Despite no global power wanting the situation to take a dangerous turn, the control of the entire game remains in the hands of one player, namely the United States. China, which was conducting military exercises with the Oman Army, has not removed its warships from the Middle East, even after ending the exercises. According to the South China Morning Post, these ships are the same ones that will remain in the Middle East. According to the newspapers, tension will increase because the presence of these ships is somehow related to the war situation in the Middle East. However, in the United States, the Chinese ambassador rejected this influence, saying that we do not have any military intentions. Our naval ships are there to evacuate people. They are conducting friendly visits to relevant countries, and that's it. So it can be said that China has decided to keep its ships there for any emergency. Now, you might be thinking that China and Russia are the 2 countries that have not yet condemned the Hamas attacks of October 7th. But they are working to prevent Israeli attacks and have been in constant talks about a ceasefire. This means that they stand against the allied powers, which include the United States, Britain, Israel, and the European NATO. So this is the Chinese position. The second position is Russia's. Russia has been present in Syria, not far from Israel, for some time now on a permanent basis. In 2016, the Syrian Bashar al-Assad government made a limited free agreement in which it handed over the Hmeimim military base, located just 11.5 kilometers from the Mediterranean Sea coast, to Russia. The base was equipped with modern aircraft like the Su-35 and began expanding and strengthening its presence there. Today, more than 1,000 soldiers are stationed here permanently. There are hangars for military jets, and Russia has even parked 4th-generation fighter planes like the Su-35 on this base. There is an anti-aircraft missile system here, and there is also a security system to protect against drones. Russia has also installed its most modern missile defense systems, the S-300 and S-400, in this area. This base fulfills a very important military role, including tanks and other gunships, helicopters, and helicopters. This base is located at a difficult 265 kilometers from Israel. In the previous vlog, it was mentioned that Russian missiles were installed in Russian aircraft. You can fly at least 1,000 kilometers. Besides military bases, these planes are also conducting flights on the Black Sea. Afterward, to the south, below Satia and Tartus Naval Base, there is also the Russian small base. The Syrian government has handed it over to Russia. But that's not where it ends. In the same year, in March-April, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow and was instructed to establish more military bases in Syria. This is likely because since the civil war began in Syria, the United States has established a free Syrian army. The purpose of this army was to weaken Bashar al-Assad's government and assist the ISIS fighters in Syria. This base was in Al-Tanf, southern Syria. When the civil war ended, both ISIS and the Free Syrian Army were defeated. But the United States did not dismantle its Al-Tanf base. The Syrian government has repeatedly demanded that the United States withdraw from our country, but the United States maintains its presence here with hundreds of troops, helicopter pads, and air defense systems. Although this base is much smaller than Russia's Meimim base, it still exists. And there doesn't seem to be any intention from the United States to vacate it in the near future. So in summary, Russia has military installations at 3 key points which are strategically important in any theater of war, or they play a significant role in maintaining the balance of power. Keep in mind that in the Mediterranean Sea, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany have the most powerful installations. We have already shown you the details of these installations in our previous logs. Now, Satia does not seem to be preparing for a showdown with both Russia and China. When major powers come together in one place, the situation becomes very sensitive, and the party with the most stake usually wants to end the conflict quickly. Now, because the United States has the most at stake, it does not want the conflict to escalate, especially in this area where its stake is the highest. And in Lebanon, where there are almost 200 missiles, if launched, can start a nuclear war. Because Israel is threatening through its experts that if Hezbollah starts firing missiles in large numbers in Lebanon, their Iron Dome system will not be able to stop it, so the answer could be nuclear weapons. However, if that happens, the war will escalate further. Satia, these are the details so far. Since the start of this war, we are updating you on it. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel for updates on these bases and in-depth details.